All right. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. To those who are joining us online, my apologies for the delayed start. We're just getting some things squared away for this session this evening. So the conversation today centers on our third. The conversation today centers on our third discussion around conflict management. And the topic for today focuses on conflict management in our families, or more specifically in our relationships. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, inshallah. Can someone just turn on the light in the lobby for me, please? It's closer to the door. The front door. All right. Thank you. So I just want to. One sec. So I just want to ground us into where all of this started, right? Where all of this started. So can anyone remind me what we have been discussing, just really quickly? What have we been discussing so far? You can just shout it out. What have we been discussing? I know it's conflict, but what? What are some of the things that we've said already? It's a break in communication. Good. What else have we been speaking about? Emotions. Good. We'll gloss over that today. What else? Right? It's about there are misunderstandings that are involved in it. Anything else? Relationships. Good. Okay. Moving towards peace. And there's another word that I'm looking for here. So it's about moving towards peace. Thank you very much, right? One of the things that we started off with, that we spent a lot of time on in the very first session, was that conflict management must be rooted in the pursuit of justice. That anything that we are doing that is about making peace, it has to be with the idea of adl or justice in mind. Because conflict resolution without justice can still be oppressive, right? It can still be oppressive if we are saying, yeah, we are trying to make peace between people, but we are giving the person who has more power the ability to create the peace that they want, and the person who has less power are more or less still the victims of it. So conflict resolution, or the movement towards peace, must be rooted in justice. Effective conflict management is a form of justice, and making peace as part of conflict management is one of the ways that we support justice, right? So justice is the thing that colors everything that we do. And one of the verses that we started off with in the very beginning of this was where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in Al-Quran Al-Kareem, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, in Surah Al-Anfal, وَإِن جَنَّهُ لِسَلْمِ فَأَجْنَ لَهَا. And if they incline to peace, you do the same, right? So this is that if they are moving towards peace, whoever you're in conflict with, or if you see two people in conflict and they are moving towards peace, then we are encouraged to incline towards the same. And then in Surah Al-Hujurat, chapter 49, Allah reminds us, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, innamal mu'minuna al-ikhwa, right? That verily all of the believers are brethren or brotherhood. Faslihu baina akhwaikum. So make peace between two of your brothers. Wattaqullah la'allakum turhamun. And remain conscious of Allah so that you might get mercy. So again, this is where we started off, right? Those are the verses that we started off with and speaking about in the very beginning. Today, we are going to continue with that conversation around how we do it in our families and more specifically in our marriages, right? And with our kids as well. So everything that we've spoken about with respect to conflict resolution is applicable in all situations, whether it is in your personal life, your professional life. Conflict resolution is something that is applicable anywhere it finds us. So when we talk about emotions, emotions is not just something that you think about when you're at home. How many of us have no emotions at work? Right, we have emotions at work, right? So all of the things that we're speaking about with respect to emotions still applicable at work as well. It's applicable in the masjid. When you come to the masjid, people frustrate you, not so? Muslims don't frustrate us? Yeah, they do, right? So we have emotions. Some of you are saying yes too fervently, right? So, but emotions are part of our everyday life, right? They happen at home, at work, and even among our brothers and sisters. So when we have our reactions to conflict, in most cases, our reactions, our behavior in conflict is very consistent. It might be contradictory, you might do multiple things, but it's consistent, meaning what? Generally, when we're in certain types of conflict, we often react or respond the same way, no matter where it is. Our behavior is generally constant. I'll say that in this way. So when we talk about our styles of managing conflict, I won't get into this. This is a whole different conversation. I'm really just setting this up to get to where we need to go. So when we talk about managing conflict, right, according to some of the work that is out there, there are 5 different ways that we respond to conflict. 5 different ways we generally respond to conflict. Some of us, we compete, meaning my way is the right way, no matter what it is. No matter what it is. And competing doesn't mean that we are forceful, right? It just means that other words that we have for it that sound pleasant, I'm sure of myself. I am certain. I know this information, so please don't try me on this. Right? We have many different ways of competing, but generally it means that we are going to pursue our interests. And it doesn't mean that we are selfish. It just means that we are pursuing what we believe to be right or pursuing what we want. So that's one thing, right? We compete. Another thing we do is we accommodate. That's on the very opposite side. The accommodation looks like where we give the other person what they want. So for some of us in conflict, we are people pleasers. Whatever happens, you're like, you know what, yeah, we'll do what you want. You want to go out to a certain place and I don't want to go there, we'll end up doing that, right? Because I'm accommodating, I'm a people pleaser, right? That's another way we generally function in conflict. A third way we function in conflict is that we compromise. And compromise means that everybody loses something. Okay, if I give this up, you give that up, and we can move on? Yeah, sure. That's a compromise. Sometimes we call it win-win, but really it's lose-lose. Everyone has to give up something for us to be able to move forward. That's what the third option is. The fourth option that they speak about is this idea of collaboration, right? Where we stick with it and we make sure that everyone gets what they want. And for most people, that sounds like the best option, but I'm going to pause that right there, right? Collaboration is where we all sit and make sure everyone's needs gets met to the utmost, right? And then the fifth option is avoid. Avoid is where we don't really try to get what we want and we don't really try to help the other person get what they want, meaning that we just left it alone. Many of us do that, right? Possibly, especially in the masjid. Something happens, I'm not going to say nothing. You know what? I'm not going to say anything to them. Now we go home and we tell everyone else, but I'm not going to say anything in the masjid. Now, I'm not going to say anything to my brother or sister in the masjid. Now, does that mean we don't have any emotions around it? No. We will still give them salam, but the salam won't be assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum. We're giving salam, right? We haven't addressed the issue, but we are still feeling something, right? That's what avoiding looks like. Avoiding in the home could look like you and your peoples have an argument at home. I'm going to go take a walk. You come back, never addressed it. You'll sit down, you'll watch a marathon on Netflix. No one talks about what happened, and you just move along. It's not that the thing got resolved, but everyone is just avoiding it. It's not like no one wants to talk about it, but people are choosing not to talk about it. So those are the 5 ways that we behave generally according to some of this in conflict. Based on those things I mentioned, you might do a couple of them at different points in time, right? No one does one thing all the time. We've all done some competing. We've all done some accommodating. We've all done some compromising. We've all done these things. But when we look at ourselves, there might be 1 or 2 of those that we do the most. That's what we're really talking about here in terms of our preferred approach to conflict. Another thing that we talk about in conflict, so again, this is not me spending a whole lot of time on it. This is just me laying this out so we can talk about the other things that we have to talk about. Another thing that we do in conflict is I need to look without my glasses. We have profiles, right? And what this looks at is what are some of the constructive and destructive things that we do in conflict. And that's what we'll spend most of the time on today. When we're in conflict, especially in our homes, there are certain behaviors that we engage in based on whatever style we choose that can be constructive or destructive. We are going to look at what does it mean to be intentional about paying attention to the behaviors that we have. We also spoke about triggers. We won't go further into that. We spoke about the things that make us annoyed, frustrate us. So all of these things cause conflict to emerge, right? But today, we're going to really spend some time looking at some of our constructive and destructive behaviors and how we manage those in our families and our relationships. So I want to ask you a question here. We all play a role in whatever conflict we find ourselves in, right? So here's the question. What are some of the things that you know, and if anyone is online, you can type in as well. What are some of the things that you know that other people do in a conflict that causes the conflict to get worse? What are some of the things that you know that other people do that may cause a conflict to get worse? They swear? When you say swear, what do you mean? Oh, you can't say it in the machine, no problem. So I think using obscene language, good, right? Not good that you use it, but I get what you mean, right? Using obscene language. That's something that people do that makes a conflict get worse. Involve others. The tag team, right? They bring somebody else in. If you know wrestling, you know what that is, right? They bring somebody else in. And you know, wrestling, they always tag the person in and then they cheat in that moment, right? Both of them double team you, and then the other one gets out, right? That's all wrestling. So they bring other people in. Make assumptions and rush to judgment. What might that look like? What might that look like?
Presuming someone had worse intentions than they had.
Good. Right. Presuming that the reason why I didn't come home at 6 o'clock when I said I would is because I didn't want to spend time with you. Right? Presuming bad intentions. What else? What else are some things that people do, you know other people do, that cause a conflict to get worse? Ad hominem, look at you. Ad hominem attacks. What does that mean?
Instead of arguing, attacking their character,
Yes. You're calling them out their name, you're attacking their character, you're this, you're... Those are things that we know people do. I think I saw a hand over here. We deflect, right? We instead of addressing the issue head on, we bring up something else that's not even part of it. All right. Anything else that we know other people do, we ignore it. It's like, yeah, I don't speak that language today, right? Like, I didn't even hear what you said, right? We were talking the same language 2 minutes ago, but all of a sudden, I don't talk that language. Anything else?
Dragging the conflict on after he felt it resolved.
Right. Some people say that you drag the conflict on after you think it has been resolved. Yeah? Some of you are shaking your head at that. Again, some of us just like to have conversations, more conversations, right? Don't make us feel bad about that. But yes, right? Drag it on. Right. So some things that other people do, bring up things from past conflicts, right? Or what we call kitchen sinking it. Like you throw everything in the kitchen sink, and that makes the conflict get worse. All right. I'll take one more, then I'll move on to my next question. Yes, you mask it, you hide it to yourself, but then you show resentment towards the other person, right? They might have been, every day, you might have been heating up their food, and then suddenly they come and it's like, your food is in the fridge. Heat up yourself, right? That type of stuff, right? All right. My second question is this. What are things that you do that escalates a conflict? I heard somebody say ignore the situation. Okay. Take too long to respond. All right, good. What else? Things that you do. You lash back. Yeah. You give. Listen. You find out, right? You find out. What else? Yeah, just about everything that was already mentioned, right? So all of these things are things that happen in conflict, whether other people do it or we do it. Yeah. But as you can see, when I asked what are the things that other people do, the answers were coming. They were coming. When I asked what do we do, it's like, oh, well, some here, right? The fact of the matter is that when it comes to conflict, many of us engage in behaviors that cause a conflict to perpetuate, right, or to escalate. So I'm going to ask you. It would be ideal if I did project this, but we didn't have time to set up the projection. So I'm going to list as best as you can, right? I'm going to list some things that we do in conflict, and it would be really awesome if you were able to see it, but I'll just list it and then see how best I can help you understand where I'm going with this. So category A, right? So these are things that we do. I'm going to list them in two categories, category A and category B. And then what I want you to do is to tell me if you see any differences between the two categories. Is that okay? So I'm going to list category A, then list category B, and I want you to tell me if you hear or see any differences between the two categories. But these are things we all do in conflict, or many of us do in conflict. So you're with me so far, right? So category A, winning at all costs, displaying anger, demeaning others, retaliating. Category A again, winning at all costs, displaying anger, demeaning others, retaliating. Category B, avoiding, yielding, hiding emotions, self-criticizing. Category B, avoiding, yielding, hiding emotions, self-criticizing. I'm going to say both categories again. So category A, winning at all costs, displaying anger, demeaning others, retaliating. Category B, avoiding, yielding, hiding emotions, self criticizing. Any similarities or differences in these two categories? If you think you have something to share, just raise your hand. Let me just see how many people want to add something. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So I'm going to Mal, Kosim, and then I'll go to Daniel and Zaina. Yeah. Amalia, sorry.
For the first category, it was like more aggressive, and then the second category was
For the first, so Amal is saying for the first category, it was more aggressive, and for the second category, it was more passive. Kosim.
They seem like they're on two opposite ends of the spectrum. Like the first category seeming more of someone who may be more of a narcissist, and the second one is of someone who may have lower self-confidence.
All right, so Kosim says that they feel like they're on two ends of a spectrum. The first category A is someone who might be a narcissist, and the second category is somebody who might lack self-confidence or have low self-confidence. Sister Daniel.
I agree with the passive and the aggressive continuum. I think also A was more outward facing, and then B was more kind of internal processing.
All right, so outward facing, along with the aggressive, the narcissism, and internal facing, along with the passive and less self-esteem, lowered self-esteem. All right, Sister Zaina. Category A is more offensive, category B is more defensive.
But between similarities, though, I think that both of them are trying for like self-preservation, and they could both be responses like of like childhood trauma.
All right, so they are both defensive, and they can both be responsive of childhood trauma. Well, according to some therapists, everything is childhood trauma, but that's only we're going to leave that here. We don't care for the psychology stuff, but I feel you. I absolutely feel you on that. So yes, to everything that you've said, right? When we talk about these two categories, we identify them as active destructive behaviors and passive destructive behaviors. And that's one of the similarities that I didn't hear anyone really identify, right? Or something I didn't hear anyone identify. All of these things are destructive behaviors in conflict. So I'll go over the list again, right? Winning at all costs, displaying anger, demeaning others, retaliating, avoiding, yielding, hiding emotions, self-criticizing. They're all destructive. Meaning that when we see these behaviors in conflict, the conflict gets worse. And I'll show you what these behaviors look like. But one, you're correct. The category A is active destructive behaviors, and category B, passive destructive behaviors. So as I go through these, see if you see yourself in these, in your conflict, in your families, and in your relationship. Winning at all costs. This is where I'm right. And the only other option here is that you're wrong. We have two options. I'm right and you're wrong, or you're wrong and I'm right. Pick which one you want to go with. And yes, I know I'm saying the same thing, but that's what winning at all costs is, right? Anything that we are doing is about winning the argument. And we are pushing to win. We use all sorts of tactics to make sure that our point, our idea, our way of doing it is the one that stands up in the end. It doesn't always have to be aggressive. It can simply be a yes, but. And if everything that comes out is yes, but, then understand that there's a tendency to try to win at all costs. Or even if it sounds like you were supposed to, but that is still us winning. You know what? Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I understand how this is impacting you, but because we use words of empathy doesn't mean that we're still not trying to win. it is still a destructive behavior. You with me? So if the goal at the end of it is to make sure that we are right, I see the facial expressions. If the goal at the end of it is to make sure that we are right, then it's a destructive behavior and the conflict will escalate. I'll pause here because I know there's a question coming. Go ahead.
So, does conflict resolution require that you don't have a point to make ever, or that you are not validating?
Good question. So, absolutely not. When we come to active constructive behaviors and passive constructive behaviors, you'll see that the question then becomes, when am I trying to be validated? And in my trying to be validated, am I really just trying to make sure that my point is the last point on the table? Because if at the end of the day, what I'm really saying is that no matter where we are, you're still wrong, the other person is still wrong, then that's just about getting validated. That's about me winning. So there's a difference between me wanting to be validated and me wanting to make sure that my point is the only point that really stands up. But very good question. Very, very good question. The second active destructive behavior that I mentioned was displaying anger. Displaying anger can be very big and it can also be very small. What are some ways that we show anger that's small? Rolling your eyes, good. Sucking your teeth, as our parents would say. Do you want to swallow them, right? Sucking your teeth. What else? Side eye. Yeah, rolling your eyes, side eye. What else? Sighing. Sighing. What else? Being terse, right? Short, good. And curt. That's what you're going to say. Anything else? Being grumpy.
Pretending that we don't hear them when they talk to us.
Ignoring them, pretending.
Ignoring them.
Yes, pretending that we don't hear them when they talk to us. Mal? Body language. What's your father? Your body language. Your body language is closed off. All right. I want to offer sarcasm as a way that we display anger. Really? Really? You really thought that was a way to do this? Yeah, that's a way to do this, sure. Yeah. As a way to show contempt and anger. Hostile humor. We tell a joke, but the hostility behind it is clear. Right? So I was just joking, but the joke that we told was meant to sting. Right? The joke that we told was meant to sting. We know what we're talking about. We've told jokes that sting in anger, and then when we get called out, you know how we joke around? Right? So the hostility can possibly be then followed with some gaslighting. The third thing was demeaning others. You know what that sounds like? You are this, you are that, you're no good, you're whatever we call them. You're untrustworthy, you're unreliable, you're on this, all of those things are demeaning them. And then we had retaliating, right? Where they did something and you do them back, right? You do it back to them. Or as we say, you pick the right one today, right? You wanted to find out, so you're going to find out, right? All of those things, right? Retaliation. So those are the active ones. The passive ones, which we are fluent in, because this is why we love the passive ones, right? The passive destructive behaviors. The reason why we do those a lot is because we want to stay sort of kind of on the good side of being Muslim. So we do these behaviors that I'm about to mention here, telling ourselves that we're on the good side of being Muslim, but really the conflict doesn't move towards justice. Avoiding. This is where you really, other behaviors are coming in this. You ignore, you stonewall, you don't give answers, you leave them unread. They send you a message, you see the message, you know they're waiting for an answer. I'm not going to answer them right now. I'll answer them later today. And the later today is like 10 hours later. What were you doing? I was working, it was a busy day. Okay, I'm not being dishonest. I was busy, but it's not that I couldn't answer. That is stonewalling. It's a destructive behavior. But the language we use to justify it is, well, I'm not being dishonest. I really was busy. But if we are really being honest, if we are really being honest with ourselves, we know that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, that is not going to stand up. Fair enough? It sounds good. We are able to justify it, but we know it's not going to stand up. Yeah? Yielding. Yielding is a passive, destructive behavior because it sounds good. Yielding is when you give the other person what they want. It sounds good, but it's a passive, destructive behavior because if we keep yielding, just to say we're giving them what they want, and then we turn back around many times and say, but I've given you all of this. I allowed you to do this. You were able to do this. I agreed with you on this. So if we yield to then hold it back up as, look at how good I have been in this relationship, it is a passive, destructive behavior. Accommodating is different from yielding. Hiding emotions is a passive, destructive behavior. We feel something, we don't verbalize it, we don't show it. Is everything okay? I'm fine. No, it feels as though I just upset you. No, you know me, I'm cool. I'm cool. You know me, I can deal with anything. It's all right. It's good. Really, I'm just going to go make 2 rakats and I'm good. I'll be all right. And you're making those rakats and you're hitting it like, like you said, you might get big. All right? But you're hiding your emotions, and then at the end of it, it's not like the prayer really allowed you to move beyond it, right? Because you still, at the end of it, you're still holding it against them. You're still upset. You're still angry. You're still looking for ways that they have pushed all of your buttons. So hiding emotions is a passive, destructive behavior. People who are good at holding in emotions doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good Muslim. I'll say that again. People who are good at holding their emotions in and not letting you see what the emotions are does not necessarily mean that they're at an elevated level of spirituality. It could be very well destructive, especially if in holding the emotions in, there are other things that are coming out that are taking away from your rights, from your dignity, from your ability to be comfortable in that relationship. You with me so far? And self-criticizing is where we say, yeah, I'm always wrong. This is me. It's on me. It's on me. It's on me. It's on me. But it's a passive destructive behavior because that cannot be sustained. Eventually, you will accuse the person of making you feel a certain way. Without a doubt. Without a doubt, it's going to come back on them. So if we are the people who our language is, yeah, I always get I'm the one who's always losing out here. We may not say it to them, but we say it to ourselves, I'm the one who's losing out here. I don't do well in this. I don't do well in this type of city. I don't do well in this relationship. I'm not doing enough. I'm not this. If that's all we are saying to ourselves, eventually we will blame the other person for making us be like that and feel like that. It's a passive destructive behavior. None of these behaviors that I mentioned, winning at all costs, displaying anger, demeaning others, retaliating, avoiding, yielding, hiding emotions, self-criticizing, done consistently, resolves conflicts. It may make an idea of peace, meaning that no one is arguing, if we hide emotions, self-criticize, avoid, and yield. No one might be arguing in the moment. We may not be fighting in the moment, but we still not cool. We still not good. You with me? So this is why these things aren't good to hold on to or to do as good behaviors in conflict. I'll pause here. Questions on this? Reactions to this? Be patient. Thank you very much. That's exactly what I'm going to next. Reactions to this. How many of these things that I described here, we see ourselves in them, like we do them? Yeah. And especially the passive ones, I would argue, right? I would wager the passive ones, we are very familiar with the passive ones. Avoiding, yielding, criticize ourselves, and stuff like that. And if we keep pushing on this, we'll see that in many cases, they don't really allow us to manage our conflict well. All right, so we started late, but I still don't want to take it too long. So I'm going to do the constructive behaviors now. I'll do the constructive behaviors. Sorry. So some constructive behaviors include listening for understanding.
Is this in one category or two categories?
Oh, this one, I thought I had in two categories, but I have it in one. So it's just going to be one category. But just now, since you're going to make me look for it, you can also put this. So I'm going to give you the list of constructive behaviors, and then in a moment I'll sort of look for the passive constructive and active constructive behaviors for you. If it comes up quickly, I'll do that. All right, so destructive. Okay, all right, destructive. Slow down, focus. Active. Okay, good. Here we go. Yeah. All right, I have them actually. Good. So active constructive behaviors. Active constructive behaviors. The first one is listening for understanding. So this goes back to, so by the end of these active ones, Sister Danielle, you'll see where there is space for us to be heard in the conflict, right? So listening for understanding. What does listening for understanding look like? Not listening just to respond. What else? What type of questions, if I'm listening for understanding, what type of questions will I ask? Questions about feelings. What else? About what they need. What you need is not, what do you really want? Why are we having this conversation? What do you really want me to do? That is not a need question. How many of us have asked the question, so what do you really want me to do? In a conflict. Raise your hand. We've asked it. Yeah. Didn't get us anywhere. That's not listening for understanding. Go ahead. I saw a hand.
I was going to say, repeating what they said.
Right. Paraphrasing, reflecting what they said. Good. When you ask a question for understanding, it's a curious question. Like true curiosity. And it might start with some okay, I heard that you said X, Y, and Z. And if I did this, would that be an appropriate way to respond to this? Or if I did this, how would you feel if I responded to it like this? Like really asking for curiosity. Or saying, I heard you say this, but really I'm being genuine. I am not clear on this. Let me say what it sounds like to me, and then you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Like really listening for understanding and checking in. When you're listening for understanding, you're focusing on the words and the emotions. For many of us, when we are listening for understanding, we focus just on the words. What you said was, and that doesn't really make sense because we start to dissect everything that is said. We're not listening for understanding. Seldom. It is really about attention. And if something comes up that is a response to what they said, then you have to check that. You have to really suppress that. Because you've stopped listening if you have an answer before they finish. And yes, I know we can all multitask. I can listen and think at the same time. Yes, I know. We do all of these things. We say all of these things. And we really convince ourselves that we are good at it. We really convince ourselves that we're really good at it. I can listen and think of how to criticize it at the same time. No, I really am good at it. That's what we tell ourselves. We can't. We can't. A second active constructive behavior is perspective taking, which is tough. Like really putting yourself in the other person's shoes. You cannot engage in perspective taking if you do not engage in re-listening. You cannot do perspective taking. Like really sit with it. Please.
So suppose you do like the same attitude and what you just said, right? Go along to get along. What if you just told
I never said that, but go ahead.
That's what I got. But what if you just disagree? You totally disagree with whatever has happened.
So okay, good.
How do you handle a situation like that?
Right. So the question is, if something is really egregious and you really disagree with something that has happened, then this would be one of the cases. Remember, early on, I said there are different approaches we have to conflict, right? We have competing, we have all of these different things, so forth and so on. If after you've done the perspective taking and you're like, let me see if I can really understand why they did it or what they were thinking in that moment. And you've really done genuine perspective taking. You've taken some time away from the immediate and you've really sat with it. We're going to go with some of those other behaviors. And you've really sat with it. And then you're like, no, what they did was really beyond the pale. It was really offensive. Then in that moment, according to this, it's okay to stand your ground. So understand something, that dealing with conflict doesn't mean that you're always giving in to the other person. That is not effective conflict management. Because if someone has done something that is really offensive and really hurtful, there is nothing in our tradition that says that we absolutely must take it and do nothing about it, because then that is not justice. Now again, the highway of Islam is we have forgiveness and tolerance, and then we can also say, well, you know what, no, this is not for me, and I'm out. As long as we are within that range, we are fine. Fair? perspective taking, intentional listening, summarizing what is heard, expressing empathy, creating solutions. So one of the things that we don't do, go ahead, Zena. An example of perspective taking. So an example of perspective taking would be so let's say the person did not, I'll go with the same thing, right? The person didn't come home at the time they said they were going to come home, or they didn't do something that they said they would do, right? Perspective taking is us putting ourselves in that person's shoes, knowing exactly who they are as a person. Like, I know this person is somebody who is generally responsible. I know this person is somebody who they fulfill their promises ever so often and stuff like that. What is it that would make them not check in with me on this particular thing? Or what is it that would make them not be able to do this at this time? And if I put myself in their shoes when they said that they were really busy, what might their busy day look like? You know, no, maybe they really were that busy because I know their job. All right, perspective taking. As opposed to saying, you really couldn't find 2 minutes just to call me? Which is a legitimate question in some cases, I'm guessing. But if we are really pushing ourselves to do perspective taking, it literally could be that they've had really busy days. We know what their days have been like because I've had busy days myself where I couldn't respond. So what does it mean to have a busy day? I know what a busy day looks like. Me taking perspective when they say they had a busy day is me saying, hey, I know what a busy day looks like. Maybe they really couldn't respond. Because if we ask ourselves that question, have there been times when you want to respond and you can't? You're like, yeah. Perspective taking is us putting ourselves in their shoes. Yeah. Even when it's really tough.
So then, sorry, this is a follow-up question.
That's good.
Like, is knowing the other person really well, like, a prerequisite?
Not necessarily. Because let's say you had never met me, Zaina. And I said, yeah, I had to do that because I was busy. Or I had to do that because I was busy. It's not that you have no concept what busy is. You know what busy is, right? Perspective taking is you hearing me say that I'm busy and saying, all right, busy is okay. I know what busy means, so I can understand why they may not have had a chance to do that. So it doesn't require that you know the person really well. But if you know the person really well, then hopefully you engage in even more perspective taking.
What if the person's response to that is you go with your mind?
Good question. So if it is that you vote with your time, right? It could be that they are displaying anger. It could be that they are not finding the right words to express their hurt, their sadness, and their disappointment in terms of what is being shared or what is being done. Is that a fair answer? All right. There are other ways that can be answered. Remember, as we said before, right, in every single interaction in a conflict is a test for the person and the other person was part of it.
Would perspective taking tie into
Would perspective taken tie into
attribution?
attribution? Yes. So, what is attribution? He's trying to test me here. So, what is attribution? So, attribution, right, is when you say that. So, I'll go with what it usually results in, right? The fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error is where we look at something that somebody did and it's a displeasing thing and we tie it to their character. But if we did the same thing that was displeasing, we would make it situational. That's what you're talking about, right? So I had to verify with him that's what he was talking about. So since he has that question, let me give you an example of what this is. How many of us have shouted at someone in an argument? Like you raise your voice in an argument. How many of you have ever been shouted at in an argument? All right. One person. Why do you think the other person shouted at you? They thought you weren't listening. And when you're not listening, that's what they do. They shout. Possibly. That's it. That's their thing. They shout. All right, somebody else. They're trying to prove their point. So there's somebody who, when they want to prove something, they shout. All right. Any other reasons why they might shout? To intimidate you. So as a person, they want to intimidate, so they shout. Anyone else?
Very upset.
They're very upset, and when they're upset, they shout. When they're upset, that's what they do. That's who they are. Anyone else? They're not listening. They're not trying to listen to you, so they're not listening to you, so they're shouting.
They want to be heard.
They want to be heard. Amal. Huh? Lack of patience. They don't have patience. All right. When you shouted, why did you shout? How many of you, before you answer that, how many of you shouted because they were shouting? Look at your hands. You don't shout. You don't lack patience. You're not aggressive. You're only shouting because they were shouting. If they were not shouting, I wouldn't shout. That is what the attribution error is. As you can see, the reason why they shouted was tied to their character. And for us, the reason why we shouted was because we were in a situation where we had to shout. But if I didn't have to shout, I would not. But whether they have to shout or not, they will, because that's who they are. So yes, perspective taking is difficult if the attribution is happening. Like, I cannot see your point as a valid point if I see you as somebody who's irrational. Yeah? I can't put myself in your shoes if you don't even know what shoes you're wearing half the time. You with me? I have to be able to see you as someone with a valid point, someone whose emotions are valid, for me to take perspective. So I have to rehumanize you first before I can take your perspective. And that's tough. So far, so good? Creating solutions. Many times we ask the other person what should be done, as opposed to us really brainstorming solutions. Expressing emotions is another active, constructive behavior. Saying how we feel. You know, this made me angry, this made me sad, this made me feel really disappointed, this made me... Like naming your emotions. And reaching out. Making the first move is an active, constructive behavior. Making the first move to apologize, even though the other person is wrong also. Making the first move to repair the emotional damage that has been caused, even though both of you were guilty of causing emotional damage. I know this one will get me in some trouble. Making the first move to reconnect. An active, constructive behavior. How many of you, when you've been in a conflict and the other person reached out first, you felt good? Yeah, you do. You do. Right? Sometimes you might feel justified. Yeah, that's why you should have reached out first, because I was right. That's not a feeling you should have, but that's a feeling you might have. But reaching out, and Allah loves those who are the first to forgive. Allah loves those who are the first to seek repentance, because reaching out first is a sign of humility, right? And that takes work. So those are active, constructive behaviors. Passive constructive behaviors, some of which may have to happen before you can get into the active ones, will be reflective thinking. Like taking a moment and really thinking about the conflict. And thinking about the conflict in a reflective moment is not this person, man. They're always so extra. Like, why? Jeez. Like, why can't they just relax, chill, take a breath? Why do they have to keep talking You're not saying it to them, you're saying it to yourself. Yeah, I'm reflecting on it. That's not what reflective thinking is. Reflective thinking is really putting yourself at the center of what is my contribution to why this is the way it is. Like, what am I doing that's causing this to be the way it is? What am I giving or not giving? I'm really looking at what are some of my options for responding differently. Like, what can I really do? So taking a moment and really analyzing how this has got the way it is and what we need to do. Another passive constructive response is delaying responding. And this is not avoiding because I don't want to deal with it. This is delaying in a very intentional way that, you know what, right now we can't. So now I'm going to just pause and then come back. Call a timeout, suggest a disengagement, create a pause. Yeah.
Does that require verbalizing?
Yeah. So if I may demonstrate this, in the middle of an argument, you get up and walk off, right? You get up and you just leave. Is that creating a pause? Yes. But is it creating a pause giving the other person respect? No. Right? Because you walking off on them is definitely going to escalate it. Definitely, most likely going to escalate it. And why did I say definitely, most likely? Because definitely it will. But most likely for doubt. Say that again?
I say yes, most likely, especially if they shouting at you and you just walk away.
Yes. Yes. Right. So the way to show, and it's very difficult to have agreements as to how you're going to behave in a conflict while the conflict is going on. So when it's calm is when you need to have this, like, listen, when things get heated, we're going to call a timeout. And the way you call a timeout is just saying timeout. Can we agree on that? Because what's going to happen is, in the conflict, when you say the words timeout, what that is going to do is trigger a different part of the mind that's going to cause the, Ayana, what is it? The reptilian brain? That she stepped out? Okay. Right. It's going to cause the reptilian brain to reconnect and make a different decision, right? Because what you're doing then, you're reminding them of something that they agreed on. So they're no longer just in the emotion. It's like, remember we said when we call a timeout, we need to call a timeout. And it's like, oh, fine. Yeah. All right. Like, as upset as it might be, it will calm them down momentarily. Because you're causing their brain to automatically do something without you forcing it to do something. The third passive thing is looking at it with some level of optimism and adapting. Go ahead. The passive ones was reflective thinking. No problem. I was about to make a joke about active listening, but now is not the time. So reflective thinking was the first was the first one. All right. Then delay responding was the second one. And then the third one is at adapting or optimism, right? Where we actually view it as resolvable. What happens if we are in a conflict and we actually start thinking that we can resolve it? Because for many of us, when we get, or for many of the imams, when we get calls, or me when I call my imams, it's because I think we can't resolve it. Like, listen, I'm done, I'm out. This is for the birds. I'm done. I did too much. They're out of pocket, right? It's because we see it as unresolvable. But what if we force ourselves to start seeing our conflicts as resolvable? That there's a way forward. Then we change our behaviors in the conflict, because many times we act in a very destructive way when we don't see a possible outcome that's positive for us. We start doing funky things. But if we know, you know what, there's a way that this can be resolved, no, you know what? We can be good in this still. It changes our behaviors drastically. Entertain alternatives to resolve as part of this adapting and optimism, and pay attention to our changes. Like what are we doing that's different? What are we doing that's incongruent with what we want to do and what we want to be, and is not in sync with how we want to see ourselves? Change those things, right? And really look at those things. So those are passive and constructive behaviors. Passive, active, and constructive, active, and passive behaviors that we want to keep in mind as we are managing our conflicts. It's 6:49. Can I get 5 more minutes and then I'm done? Is that a question? 5. Oh, you're saying 5. Because I know you'll have to prep. Because this is our last session. So 2 more things, right? I'll take 1 minute with this thing and then 3 minutes with the last. There are 3 C's that we may find ourselves doing in our relationships: criticism, contempt, and complaint. Avoid criticism, avoid contempt. Complaints with modifications can be okay. So criticisms are often global and might be like, you always do this, you never do this, right? That's a criticism. Or when we get into blaming them for the things that are going wrong. Like, you're the reason why we are not happy. You're the reason why. You're the reason, like blaming them for just about everything that is going on. That's wrong. That's criticism. Avoid those. Contempt is where you start adding insult to the criticism, right? Examples of contempt. Give me a sec. 3, 4. No, 3, 4. Examples of contempt. You are totally irresponsible, right? You fail at everything that you do. That's harsh, right? You're totally irresponsible. It's something that anytime you try things like these, you're never successful. When are you going to stop trying? Some of us may have heard those things before, or similar things. Those are problematic. And if you've said them, avoid them. A complaint is where you might name the emotion that you're feeling and name what happened, and you can work with that. So an example of a complaint is, I am upset that you didn't pay the gas bill. Straight, clean, to the point. Right? That's a complaint, but it's navigatable. Or I'm upset that the gas bill wasn't paid, if you want to depersonalize it from the other person. You know, I'm really upset that the gas bill wasn't paid. It's a complaint, but it's not an attack, and it's not a criticism. You with me? When we don't go out together, I feel like you take me for granted. A complaint, but not a criticism, and not an attack, right? Or when we don't go out, I feel like I'm being taken for granted, or I feel like I'm not being valued. It's me locating it within what I feel with what has happened, and not necessarily say you never take me out because you don't care about me. Same thing I'm raising, not going out, raising it very differently without attacking. Yeah? And the attack ones we have heard or we've said various times. So those 3 C's, avoid as best as possible the criticism, the contempt, and you can manage a complaint. So I'll wrap with this. Marriage is a test, right? We always hear that. Marriage, family, all of these things are a test. We always hear that. And let us now locate it in our tradition. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, we shall try you, by the way of translation, we shall try you until we test those among you who strive their utmost and persevere in patience, and we shall try what is reported of you. Akhbarakum. So, وَنَبْلُوَ أَخْبَارَكُمْ is a statement here that Allah uses. And the translation here is, Allah says that, and the verse is really about jihad, the verse about jihad, the jihad that we are familiar with in terms of going to war. At the same time, we know that jihad is something that jihad, when broadened in terms of the definition and construction of it, is how we navigate and how we struggle and strive in our lives, right? So in this particular verse, Allah is saying that we shall try you until we test those among you who strive their utmost, who keep pushing forward, right? And persevere in patience. Wasabirin, right? And they are of the ones who persevere in patience. وَنَبْلُوَ أَخْبَارَكُمْ. And we shall test what is reported of you. So, we often hear that marriage, family, all of these things are a test. Yeah, I'm ready for marriage because I think I am. I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to work. I'm ready to put it all out. I'm ready to put it on the line. This is what is reported of you. What is going to get tested? Nabluwa akhbarakum. We're going to test your assertions to see if they're true or not. You say you believe, we're going to test your assertions. You say you mu'min, Muslim, muhsin, we're going to test your assertions. And when Allah tests, Allah tests. Sheikh, fear? Oh, sorry. Surah 47, verse 31. And the different translations of this might be like, we shall try you until we test those among you who strive their utmost and persevere in patience, and we shall try your reported metal. I think that's a Yusuf Ali translation. The Muhammad Asad is the assertions that you make of yourself, is the other reference to that you might see. And in the tafsir of this, it says that we will appraise or we will assess or we will reveal your record in terms of whether you acted with obedience or disobedience in concerns with the struggle that you found yourself in. So we will hold up your record for you. We will test your record and see whether you were obedient or disobedient based on what you said about yourself or based on what others say about you. Nabluwa akbarakum. So when we say marriage is a test, it's here. It doesn't become half of our deen just because it sounds good. It is. That's why sometimes you want to walk away. Like, I can't do this anymore. Right? I mean, but it's serious. It is because we are tested. So, please.
I have a question. This out of curiosity, in your experience, right? Your years of experience, what is the main cause of divorce that you have seen excluding money? I'm just curious.
Excluding money?
Yes.
So I was about to say breach of trust, but breach of trust is a number of different things. Breach of trust, so infidelity is a big one, whatever various levels and forms of infidelity, right? Whether you just be talking to somebody else, or that's a big one that comes in. But the other one, according to what we've seen, is the influence or the involvement of relatives. Like that hit a chord. All right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what you bring that.
Well, you're testing me every day. All right. So, but yeah, so involvement of relatives. And this particular research study was really looking at in-laws, like involvement of in-laws as a big one, and finance as another one. But in all honesty, one of the things that we see in the data, my thing was on this, right? Divorce and spirituality. One of the things that we see in the data is that people who have, but what predicts divorce in all honesty is that people who have been divorced before are more likely to get divorced again. Like when we look at the data, people who have experienced divorce before, it's not saying that they will, but when we look at the sample study, when we look at the sample, those who were divorced once are more likely, as the greatest predictor of divorce, when we did the statistics on it, as the greatest predictor of divorce, people who were divorced previously. One of the things that we saw, I know you have to get into the anyway. One of the things that we saw that actually predicted marital happiness or marital satisfaction. I didn't plan to talk on this today at all, but this is literally what my dissertation was about. Marital satisfaction. One of the things that, or the two things that we saw that predicted couples would be happy or more content in their marriages, the couples that prayed together frequently, and the couples that did things together intentionally, are the predictors of marital satisfaction or happiness. Right? So we found that those who didn't do things, and this was a survey of over about 300 African American or Black Muslims in the United States. And this is the data that came out. And this was 2017.
Do you got a copy of that? All right, can I get a copy? I just want it for myself. Okay.
Oh, you find it something very familiar? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'll send it. Something. All right. So let me wrap up with this. That was a good question. Let me wrap up with this. Good character. When I say good character, where do we think about showing good character? When I say, because the Prophet, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right, was Uswatun Hasana. Yeah? He was the best of character. He was the most sublime of morals. He was the most excellent of character. When we say have good character, what do we picture? What do you picture? Tell me. Trustworthy. But where do you picture showing that? Right. Huh? In children, all right. Where else? Like when I say a Muslim should have good character, where do you see that Muslim displaying that good character? What place? Around other Muslims, around non-Muslims, in public. Yeah. Most of us, right? When we think of displaying good character, we seldom get an immediate picture of within our families. Fair enough? We see it outside of the family, good character. Like Muslims need to be honest. We often think of it, how I'm treating my brothers and sisters in Islam, because as imams, we often say that, right? Brothers and sisters. Treat your brothers and sisters well. When we hear that phrase, we don't generally think of our family. We think of people on the outside. So part of that could be on us as well, right? That we generalize the term brothers and sisters to mean non-family relationships. So then when we think of good character, we think of it external to the family as opposed to internal, where it has to start. So if the Prophet ﷺ was of sublime morals and excellent character, guess where he started? If the Prophet ﷺ said he was sent to perfect good character, and Abu Darda radiallahu an said that Allah's Messenger said, there's nothing which is heavier upon the balance or upon the scale than good character. So if the Prophet ﷺ said he was sent to perfect it, if he also said that there's nothing heavier on the scale than good character, and then, let me say one more thing here. The Prophet ﷺ also said that among the Muslims, the most perfect as regard to his faith is the one whose character is excellent. And the best among you are those who do what? Are the best of their family or treat their wives well. Good character, yes, but it has to start at home. So if our good character is not being reflected in our homes, then we're not on it. And we have work to do. That is where it has to start. That's where it has to be. The people who should see us as most forgiving is who? Yeah, the people closest to us. If my brother in the masjid can see me as most forgiving, but my family doesn't see me as most forgiving, something is wrong. If my sister is seeing me as most generous, but my family isn't seeing me as most generous, something is wrong. If everyone else is seeing me as boom, 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 but my family isn't seeing me as that, then it's not all attribution. It's not all attribution. Something needs to change. Fair enough? The thing I want us to take away from this is good character. And at the end of everything that we do, our task is to be better in the sight of Allah and be better to His creation. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to elevate ourselves, to be elevated in our character. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to really move forward with justice in all of our relationships. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to really find the things that draw us closer to Him and add that, and the things that take us away from Him, remove those things from us. I really pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to benefit as best as we possibly can in these last days of the month of Ramadan. May Allah enrich us. May He forgive us. May He restore us. I pray that if there's anything that I said that was incorrect or offensive, that Allah forgives me for it, that you forgive me for it, and know that it was for myself. And anything that was beneficial, that was good, that is by the mercy of Allah and is from Allah alone. May Allah accept us, reward us, and accept from us, accept us, bless us, and reward us, and forgive us. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم. We shall end with Surah Al-Asr. أعوذ من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Ameen. And I'm going to stop the stream. But we are officially done. But if people are asking questions, it's fine still. I'll hang on for a moment.